Welcome, audiences. My name is Thomas Schuttenhelm, and I'm the Artistic Director at Network for New Music. Today, we have a joint interview, a special one with Maren Montalbano, our featured soloist and mezzo-soprano. Hi, Maren.
Hi.
Many of your audiences may remember Maren from our October 2019 performance when she performed some really brilliant songs by Florence Price. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that later. We also have our featured composer who has composed wonderful work for us on commission, Lansing McLoskey. Hi, Lansing.
Hello.
Great to see you. Lansing, if you remember, you and I met back in, I think it was 2014, back in Seattle, when we both had works played by a great choir named Choral Synthesis.
Yes, yes.
I distinctly remember that performance, your beautiful music, and also we had a very nice conversation, and I always wanted to work with you again, and the 100th anniversary of the publication of James Joyce's Ulysses gave me that great opportunity.
Perfect opportunity.
I wanted to start with just thinking through with both of you, like, how did your lives intersect with James Joyce's book? My mother, who used to own a bookstore, used bookstore, gave me for my 19th birthday a copy of Ulysses, and I was much too young to really understand it at that time, but it's always lived with me. And I just wondered, could you tell us a little bit about how you first came to know that text and maybe have grown with that text? Maren, tell us a little bit about your background, if you would.
Oh, well, I had never read Ulysses until this time, and I am currently almost done. I've got one more chapter left, but it's been quite a journey, to be honest. Like, I started it because of this project, and I don't think I realized. Like, I was like, I'm a smart person. I can read hard literature, but like, I don't think I quite realized what I was getting myself into. But you know, it has been kind of really cool to give myself the space to let these words kind of wash over me without really having to, you know, comprehend every single tiny little word or sentence or paragraph.
Yeah, it is one of those signature modernist texts that is extremely difficult. And, you know, in many ways, people say that they don't read it, they only reread it because it is so dense. But I certainly hope that other people will take this as the opportunity to get to know that text, which this is a great chance, if one has never read it, to dive into it. Lansing, tell us a little bit about your intersection.
My story is very similar. You know, I guess one difference would be that as a composer and somebody immersed in 20th century and 21st century, you know, contemporary music, of course, one is very familiar with really sort of the two pillars, the Stravinskys and Schoenbergs of the 20th century literature world, which would be Beckett and Joyce, because their texts were set so often, and we'll actually come back to that too. But I had also never read Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake until this project. So when you and I first met and we discussed this, and I was like, wow, yes, let's do it. Well, first you called me and said, are you interested in writing a commission for the 100th anniversary of Ulysses? And I think my response was probably yes, acting like, you know, of course I've read it. And when in fact I hadn't, so as soon as I sort of hung up the phone, I was like, okay, Amazon, purchase. And then I ran right to a very dear friend of mine, Glenn Nelson, who wrote the libretto for my opera. And I told him about this project, and he said something like, well, you know that I wrote my master's thesis on Joyce and Ulysses, and I'm a bit of a Joyce scholar. And I was like, what? So that was like really helpful, because one of the difficult things is finding an entry point. because you pick up the book. Mine's actually on my bed table, but it's about that thick, and it doesn't take long. I mean, it does not take long before you realize, like, oh, this is going to take a while. And it's actually not because of the the length. It's just because of the writing style. So what I actually did first was, actually, I haven't counted the pages, but I probably read. So I read the first, I guess, 2 chapters. Then I took a step back, and then I did a massive amount of research. And so I read probably close to a Ulysses length of articles and dissertations and reviews, and that led me to letters of Joyce and just multiple sources and critical analysis and books. Then when I came back, it was a very different experience. I wouldn't say easier, but different, and in a helpful way. And the irony is that I also felt somewhat liberated. Like, I didn't have to reread. I mean, sometimes you get through these passages where I was rereading the same 3 sentences, 3 times, or going and finding myself kind of all of a sudden, how did I end up on this page? I don't remember anything that happened. I know I read the last 4 pages, but I don't remember anything. And then going back. And I guess if you're going to write a book or something, that's, that would be the way to go. You want to make sure but I found, like, forget that. You've got to, it's like listening to a Mahler symphony. If you hit pause every time and rewind to try to understand what Mahler just did, you'll never get through it. You have to just sort of let the music sometimes wash over you and think, hey, on that 3rd listen, maybe I'll understand that scherzo better. And so that's the way I approach the Ulysses.
You had mentioned that you're not only using the text from Ulysses, you're also using letters. And what I find really interesting is that you begin the commissioned piece not only with a letter, but with the end.
Yes.
So if I could read that, the letter is to his son, which says, "Here I conclude. My eyes are tired. For over half a century, they have gazed into nullity, when they have found a lovely nothing." And that's such an interesting way to begin a piece at the very end of the process.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let me just make a couple of comments in response. I realized immediately, I think in our very first conversation, that I couldn't just, write a piece that's setting like cool, my favorite quotes from the 750-page novel. It wouldn't, first of all, I think it would kind of be a shallow endeavor. I mean, it would be fine for maybe a 6-minute piece, but a piece like this,
Yes.
Honoring, the centenary, it needed to have more of a through line, more depth, more of a Joycean approach. So there are many, many excerpts, but I knew that wasn't the way to go. So, and in terms, so I did, come across letters. Turns out that there are volumes, like literally multiple volumes of letters. Some of these people are funny because they just hold on to everything.
You have to embody so many different personas throughout this. So, like I said, we start with a letter, sort of like the embodiment of Joyce, and then move into all of these characters. Tell us about how you have to shift throughout this piece.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I as I've been studying and working and practicing on this, I've been kind of looking at the whole piece as developing an opera role, but it is multiple characters, as you say, even in the first movement, I'm multiple voices, not just, I'm Joyce in two different languages. And then I'm also Daedalus, so there's like Daedalus is Joyce in like his avatar in the book.
Yeah.
And so there's this like, I don't know, I feel like a narrator. I feel like I also feel like this voice has a deep ownership in what is to come. I think it's a brilliant way to start the piece, because it does kind of set up the fact that there are multiple voices going on. Then throughout the piece, I am the woman who photographed Marilyn Monroe. I am the publisher of the book. I am Molly Bloom, and then I'm also just kind of random, weird silliness.
Let me jump in there, because that's also a decision I made early on, is that rather than portray characters or even any sort of plot line at all, I looked for thematic threads. So one of them is love, and the multifaceted, complex, and sometimes kind of thorny approach that Joyce takes to love in all its different facets. So I chose phrases, but it could be from 5 different characters.
Right.
So there was no attempt to portray, Maren's not portraying one character. She's following a thread. And the same thing with like the gibberish, the sort of nonsense, the nonsense language and words and babble stuff actually appear sort of scattered throughout the whole book. And it didn't matter who was saying it. I just sort of gathered those together into another one of these threads.
Now, Lansing, you mentioned before, these pillars of music and literature, and Joyce certainly has a very recognizable style, immediate from the first page. How did you deal with Joyce's style and your own style? How did you sort of calibrate those two aspects to convey that story within One Book Ulysses?
Wow. I don't know. I'm not sure I did. Really, because, well, in seriousness, I think that's one of the I talk to my students about this. One of the joys, responsibilities, roles of a composer when you're setting text, I feel at least, is I'm not solely concerned with capturing the voice or even always the exact meaning of the author. I'm looking at it through the my own lens, and sort of trying to convey my interpretation. I mean, I would not want to go against the obvious intention of a poet or an author, and I don't think I do that. But really, I was more sort of concerned with capturing a mood, an essence, an emotion that is through my own eyes, my own experience of this text. I think it would be a huge sort of burden if for me as a composer to try to really get inside a poet, or particularly Joyce, his head, and then write music that somehow was Joyce or the voice of Joyce. So I didn't. That was not my intention.
Can I interject?
Please, Maren,
here,
yes, please.
I have to say, as somebody who is currently reading Ulysses and who is working on this, though, I feel that whatever it was that you did, Lansing, you definitely captured a Joycean spirit.
Yeah.
And, that translates very, very well. The way that he set up these chapters and the way that you set up these movements are, there's parallel there. And I know that you did that on purpose. And I want to just say, that well done you, because I can definitely, I mean, I can see it. And of course, I've been spending a lot of time with it, but I'm very sure that the audiences who come, they'll be able to see that as well.
And even though
Good, yeah.
we're speaking, as we did at the beginning of this interview, that this publication, we're honoring the 100th anniversary, for many people, this is a very new text. And this is a new piece. So let's kind of embrace that newness. And I
Yes.
very much think you captured that spirit. And I hope people will hear that. But Maren, I know that this was written for you, and you two worked
Very much
together. So Maren, tell us a little bit about how that working relationship between composer and performer throughout these past months and year.
Well, I mean, I've known Lansing for quite some time now, like almost 10 years, maybe longer. Yeah. And so we've worked together through stuff with The Crossing, and I've always liked his music. And I certainly, you know, the last time we really did something together, well, that he wrote something for me was for in Zealot Canticles. And that won a Grammy. So I think it's pretty good combination. We, I think, worked very well together. We had a talk last summer, and he sort of outlined his ideas. I got really excited about it and really started diving into it. And as I played around with this, I wasn't shy to say, like, hey, this is a little bit too high. Can you change some of the notes? You know, that kind of stuff. And honestly, the reason that I did that was I knew that I could trust him to not take that like personally or anything like that. You know, I'm here to serve the music, and he knows that. So.
And so you two were sharing drafts with each other back and forth. Is that how it worked?
I would send her a chunk of music, and I guess sometimes also with a MIDI realization. I don't know if I did that every time, but then she would go over it, or we would talk, and then it was really helpful. Sort of later in the process, she started sending me recordings and video excerpts, and usually my response was, "This is awesome. This is going to be no problem. I can't believe what you're doing. This is amazing." So, and then we you know, as one does, I think we went through sort of every measure at some point, and really talked in some detail about not just notes and rhythms, but like how can I or should I interpret this line? And so much of it you can take in several different directions. Even that opening line, in fact, that's actually a great example, because there are a dozen places exactly like that, where it could be read in, you know, sort of three different ways, in a very sort of nihilistic kind of wah wah way, or in a way that's actually sort of frank, confessional, but also even like optimistic. There's like there's a sense of darkness and hope in that, and so I love that about Joyce's writings, even in his personal letters, which were never intended to be published. And I love that. I think some of the sections I'm going to be surprised, because, you know, I have not heard Maren perform the whole thing, so it could be taken in several different
and
directions.
You've given me a lot of rope with which to hang myself at the end. I have
Maren, is that the controlled improvisation section?
Yes.
Tell us more about how you're interpreting that.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be in the moment. I really am like very intentionally, as I'm practicing it, I'm trying it with different spots. Basically, how it works is the whole piece, right? Like the movement itself, all of the orchestra stuff is written out, but the soloist is like, I have specific themes that, you know, I have to sing, but I can choose the rhythm, I can choose the tempo, and I can choose the text. And I have like about 4 pages of text that I can just choose any of which. It's all Molly Bloom. It's her soliloquy at the end. And and between Lansing and I, like we've kind of cut it down to like certain specific choices, but even so, it's almost overwhelming the amount of choice that I have. So as I've been practicing it, I've been sort of playing around like, okay, well, what happens if I do this? How do I feel at the end? What happens if I do this? How do I feel at the end? And the more I do that, the more I gain confidence that in that moment of the performance, I will be able to choose the right thing for that moment. And I won't be able to know what that what that feeling is until I'm in that room with all of the audience, with all, just sort of like, I'll be able to find it, but I can't do that until I practice all of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I should also point out that this movement is also in the orchestra part is quite a bit different than the rest of the piece, in that Molly's soliloquy, as it's called, the last chapter of the book, is really a stream of consciousness while she's lying in bed, and it just kind of goes all over the place. And I felt like the music. Many people have set the last 8-10 sentences of this, or lines, not sentences, the whole.
Yeah.
But they usually take a very sensual, beautiful approach, because that's the the beautiful kind of climax there, without any context. I decided to make a larger chunk of the text, as Maren discussed, but also try and capture that in the music. And the way that I did that was I went and looked for every piece written in the past 100 years that sets Ulysses. And so the music in this final movement is comprised 100% excerpts and quotations of 22 different compositions setting excerpts of Ulysses. Many composers that people have heard of, Samuel Barber, Barrio.
I want to make a note here for our audiences, because Maren, you'll also be singing Solitary Hotel by Samuel Barber in the first set, which comes back in your piece.
Yeah.
Yes, there are just a few little snippets of it in the so see if you can recognize that.
So I have a feeling if you have your ear tuned to it, you'll be able to
listen closely. Yeah. So yeah. So it's sort of in a way, maybe the most Joycean movement of the whole piece, in that it's sort of a stream of consciousness collage. It's not dissimilar from what Barrio did in Symphonia with Beckett, but yeah. And then there's some surprises too, which we won't talk about right now. Well, let's leave the surprises to be true surprises.
And that's always good to leave on a surprise. So I want to remind our audiences that they can hear a preview of this with excerpts from One Book Called Ulysses on Friday, May 20th at the Rosenbach Museum at 5:30. And then we'll have the premiere performance at the Settlement Music School on Sunday, May 22nd at 3 p.m. So I hope everyone can join us. And thank you, Maren, and thank you, Lansing. Look forward to seeing you both.
Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you, Thomas.